Hello everyone, my name is Marina, and today we will take a walking tour that covers the history of three main locations. So it will be the lower Donlands River, the Old Roostery Squad, and the Distillery District. Along the tour, we will rediscover the places from the perspective of critical look at history preservation and name issues. So, what my critical position? And my critical position is underlined from Dolores Heitlin articles, that is, what we preserve is what we value. And during my history research, I observed that we tend to preserve the architecture and ignore the social aspects of its history. But why do we value of architecture preservation without all the stories of people behind it? And yes, we do preserve the history of rich, usually white, upper-class influential figures, but it is a small part of the whole picture. So my analysis is more about what kind of history and preservation we are lacking than what we have. Another layer of my analysis is toponymy, that has a clear link with the history of a place. The issue of after whom we name our streets, how politicals manipulate history and set up a social order in that history that all related to naming issue. And we start our walking tour from the lower Don River. The first trace of indigenous settlements on this land can be traced back to 7,000 years ago. So, the Don River had an indigenous name, and Mississaugas calls this place Vakadeniash, that might refer to the practice of controlled burns. The indigenous people have been maintaining a huge swaths of savannas of grass and medicine by burn controls. Many of those savannas are thousands of years old, so there are generations and generations involved in that process of burning and maintaining process. And this name, Vakadeniash, recalls these huge generational investments in that land. In 18th centuries, the river was renamed to Don River, and recently the question to returning the place to its original name was raised. However, the proposal is to give an Anglicized version of that name, Vaktonesh Parkland. According to David Madden, toponymy is a symbolic tool to make a social order, and I think that this acceptance of the English version name is showing suppression of the Canadian government, Canadian culture upon the indigenous people culture, language, rights, and history. Running ahead, actually, when I was researching the history of industrial places along our walk, in most of cases, I did not find any mentions or stories that were that they have a history of first indigenous people prior the industrialization time. So now we return to Martin Gutman Trail, and we see the silos that are named by the public. It's called the Old Roostery Squad. And the name begins from a community of squatters who started to live there in 1998 and painted like 20-meter size rooster on the side of one of the elevator in that silos. So between 1998 and 2004, the numbers of squatters was growing, and the settlements got the name a tent city. Historically, the silos were a part of the Victoria Soya Mills that were built between 1944 and 1948. And the silos were a place for store soybeans before reprocessing. Initially, it had the name of Sansoy, and after the Second War, it was renamed Victory Soya Mills, and Victory emphasized kind of the support for war, and that they give all this processed food, that they make this effort to win this war to really feed the people and animals. The silos were recently recognized as architectural heritage, and during my research, I found that most of information related to manufacturing history and technical architectural characteristic of that silos. However, I was not able to find any mentions of photos of workers of the Victory soy mills. Thus, it shows that physical structure and production seems to be more valued than communities that work there. To go around the silos, we actually take the Martin Gutman Trail that connects entire lakeshore. It's named after Martin Gutman, president of Toronto Star newspaper, and he believes that people need to have a common bonds or links so that people feel as proud they part of something. And this belief of Martin connects us with Dory Hendes and the question of public history preservation and spread of community stories that give power to that communities and join them together locally and globally. So as we're going off this trail, on the right side we have a railway and expressway. And the story of railway starts from 19th century when it was a railway boom. And under the sponsorship of Canadian politician Frank Hennings, this part of railway was built. Overall, railway construction created green demands for workers. And people immigrate from different places all around the world, and when they immigrate to Canada, they encountered exploitative working conditions and poor living circumstances. So during my research, I was not able to find any preserved stories of working people and communities who was involved in the construction in this part of railway. So which we see in front of the distillery district and right here. So the Grenville Expressway along the Arway was built 100 years later. And it's named after the first chair of Metro Toronto Council, Frederick Grandier, who was the main advocate for this project. During my research, most of the photos I found portrayed Frederick or the empty expressway. I found a few photographies with workers. They always portrayed as small figures and their faces are not recognized. The same as with the railway history, I didn't find any stories of people who built the Grandier Expressway. Most of the articles are all about this Big Daddy. He has a name Big Daddy also, Frederick Grandier. So from this part of the research, we see a clear disconnection between the historical landscape of the city and preserved history of working people. The privilege to be remembered was given to Frederick and Gardner and Franklin Hincks, not to people who did the hard work or even dangerous work. After passing the expressway and railway, we enter the distillery district. And it's a district that serves as a model of how we approach preservation in the city of Toronto. During my research, I found that most of the information and preservation in distillery district related to architecture, production, and memory about owners, architects, and other rich class figures. I found just a little information about the community and working people there. On the left corner of the map is a rare photo of long-term workers at the distillery, and some of them worked for more than 15 years. On the top right corner is a map of on the map is a photo of Jack Bentley, who was a carpenter at the distillery. In the upper left of the trail represents the story of Isaac Doran that immigrated to Toronto from Ireland with his wife Rosie and 4 children. When he moved, he settled close to the distillery on the shore and worked as a miller there. His children at very young age left the school and also worked at the distillery. So even though I was able to discover a few stories, many faces were forgotten. I would like to conclude this part of presentation with some memories of workers, of distillery workers. The workers at the distillery were like members of an extended family. Employers often playing jokes on one another, enjoying annual Christmas party, occasionally drafting off whiskey left in the bottom of barriers, and generally looking after one another. So, and when we left distillery, we go straight and we return back to the start, to Vakkadenyas. And what we learn from this exercise, from this research. And first of all, I came to the conclusion that the history of the place is not a history of a founder or architect, but the history of community of those places. Secondly, that our system of preservation is based on class, privilege, and politics. Lastly, the history of our city fabric is not linear. It's not a history book with timeline. It's complicated web of different stories that made the social industrial city fabric of the lower Don River. Thank you.